This is Kaer Morhen, the Witcher's Keep. It's hard to find a safer place in the whole world. There used to be a beautiful castle here, a long time ago. No one lives in Kaer Morhen now, no one but Vesemir. Vesemir was really very old. Who knows, he could even be older than Kaer Morhen. But he walked towards Triss with a brisk, energetic and sprightly step. His grip was vigorous, and his hands strong. The wise and wizened Witcher's bones may ache and creak, his hair may go grey, but Vesemir always said that no Witcher dies in his bed. And for the oldest living Witcher, Vesemir was not willing to buck that trend. Vesemir would die fighting, with sweat on his brow and sword in hand. If a monster was going to get the better of him, he would make it one hell of a challenge. In the grand saga of fate and heroism which has embroiled our protagonists, in which the threads of destiny weave Geralt and Ciri together, in which the world comes to the brink of destruction, and the wild hunt is hot on their heels, Vesemir was never meant to take centre stage. For Vesemir, life on the path was all he needed. When the snows clear and the first flowers of spring bud on the meadows and mountainsides surrounding the old sea keep, Vesemir saddles his horse and rides at a canter through the valley, along the meandering waters of the Gwenlech, the White River, down into civilization, where his services as a witcher may be bought by the people of the northern kingdoms. When the leaves turn brown and fall from the trees, Vesemir returns to the northwest, retracing his steps back up into the mountains, to his secluded home, Kaer Morhen, where he waits out the winter, sometimes with the company of his former pupils, other times completely alone. That is the life of the oldest witcher in the world, lived at his own pace. Vesemir's role in the fate of the world is not an active one, yet his life's work is present at every stage of the story. Geralt, Ciri and every other witcher of the Wolf School owes their success and their skill to Vesemir's teachings. They would not be who they are without him. Every victory on the battlefield, every monster slain, every evil expelled from the world is only possible thanks to Vesemir. Geralt may not know his parents, but when opening up to a young priestess of Melitel, his words speak volumes of Vesemir's significance. Who's Vesemir? He's my father. Why are you so surprised? What's so strange about it? Everyone's got a father, and mine is Vesemir. And so what if he's not my real father? I didn't know him, or my mother. I don't even know if they're still alive, and I don't much care. Hey guys, it's Drew here, and in this installment of my Witcher lore and mythology series, I wanted to talk about one of the most beloved characters in the Witcher series, the grumpy old git with a heart of pure gold. This is Vesemir's story, interspersed with nuggets of wisdom, spoken directly from the Witcher's mouth. Let's get started. When you fight a beast, knowledge counts as much as a silver sword. At the very least, you ought to be able to tell a ghoul from an owl ghoul. We all know the importance of respecting one's elders, but given the nature of the Witcher profession, Vesemir's age warrants considerably more recognition. There are few jobs more grueling and more dangerous than a Witcher's. Rigorous training and discipline goes a long way in keeping a Witcher alive, but even with those taken into account, the mortality rate of a Witcher is disproportionately high, especially given their mutated lifespans. We can't say for sure how old Witchers can get, as no Witcher has ever died of old age, which is incredible to think about. We see through Vesemir that Witchers are affected by the aging process, but it takes a long time. Geralt is around 100 years old, and even as a youth he remembers Vesemir being old. Solid ages are rarely given for main characters in the world, but I think it's safe to assume that Vesemir was between 300 to 400 years old. That's a great many years spent on the Witcher's path. Vesemir has undoubtedly slain more monsters than any other living Witcher, perhaps any other Witcher in history. That is a profound testament to his might. All that time, all those duels, where one mistake means death, and Vesemir endured. Vesemir redefines the term respect your elders. As I've mentioned already, we can't start Vesemir's tale at his birth, as we don't know when that was, but Vesemir may have been present the day that Kaer Morhen was constructed and used as the impenetrable headquarters of the Wolf School. Some say that in the olden days, before humans came to inhabit the world, the ground upon which Kaer Morhen was built was submerged under the sea. There is evidence of fossilized sea creatures embedded in the stones beneath the keep. And in the Elder speech, the language of the elves, Kaer Morhen means Keep of the Elder Sea, or Old Sea Fortress. Vesemir is not nearly that old though. It's also hard to imagine a mentor other than Vesemir at Kaer Morhen, yet someone had to teach the teacher. Vesemir's tutor was a witcher named Barmin. It is theorized that he perished in the pogrom carried out by a mob of fanatical humans and their mages. The siege left the fortress in tatters, and all the witchers residing within were killed, their bones thrown into the moat. But that isn't confirmed, and Barmin's fate is a mystery. The one thing we do know is that, judging by Vesemir's abilities, Barmin must have been a brilliant swordsman and a fine witcher. Almost all of the journeys we embark on through Geralt's perspective take place in the latter half of the 13th century, but we know that Vesemir was actively taking witcher contracts as early as the year 1112. It's always the same. Instead of sending for a professional, they try to do it themselves, and only end up making matters worse. Vesemir likely spent most of his days on the Witcher's Path. In the spring, summer and autumn, he would ply his trade across the continent, before retiring to Kaer Morhen ahead of the coming snow. He also served as the Wolf School's fencing instructor, but only after a tragedy befell his home. Sometime in the latter half of the 12th century, the ever-present disdain for witches, which had threatened to boil over for some time, culminated in an angry mob somehow finding their way to the mountain fortress and besieging it. The humans, no matter how ired, had no hope of ever penetrating the old keep's walls, but some of the witches who would have helped defend Kaer Morhen were away, and the humans had brought mages with them. These sorcerers barraged the keep with arcane fire, and the castle soon crumbled beneath the might of the amassed crowd. It is speculated that not a single witcher present survived the siege, though some believe Vesemir had been present, but had survived by disguising himself amongst the corpses of his close friends. I for one hope that Vesemir hadn't been there that day. I hope he didn't see his brothers die, or witness their charred bones be thrown into the moat surrounding the keep. If he had been present, that would only make his annual retreat to the ruined fort that much more tragic. Geralt, Lambert and Eskel had not been witchers when Kaer Morhen was left in ruins, and even though the fencing instructor Vesemir had survived, he alone would not be enough to offer a future for the Wolf School. Vesemir understood the physical training needed to become a witcher better than any other, but he knew little of the chemistry that transformed young boys into mutated monster hunters. Fortunately, other experienced witchers had survived, including Grandmaster Ren, who became the new leader of the Wolf School and chose Vesemir as his new second-in-command. The former sword instructor had been a witcher named Varin, but it's believed he perished in the pogrom. At some point during his tenure as fencing instructor, Vesemir had been visited by a roving druid and sorceress named Vizenna. She gave Vesemir a young boy, her own son Geralt, to be trained as a witcher. Vesemir had a close bond with all his students, the kind of harsh affection a strict teacher has with promising pupils, but he had a particularly strong connection with this youth, and Geralt would forever look up to Vesemir as a father figure. No further information about his actions in the 12th century is available. In the year 1211, Vesemir lifted the curse from the Swan of Povis. By adhering to old folk traditions, he found a solution to the curse. He took the swan into the mountains and placed it on a gravestone. He then waited until the stroke of midnight before giving the swan tea brewed with hemlock, a notoriously poisonous plant. What came next is a mystery, as the cantankerous old witcher decided he need not deign to explain himself to the sorceress Yennefer of Vengerberg when he retold the story in the year 1272. It seems that there was another conspiracy to murder witches sometime after the pogrom of Kaer Morhen. The monarchs of Kedwen, the country in which the Wolf School was located, had financed the schools of the Wolf and Cat, but after organising a tournament between the two schools, King Radovid II of Kedwen had conspired with druids and his court mage to butcher the witches in cold blood. Vesemir had been temporarily imprisoned when this occurred and was safe from the treachery. It's said that some of the Cat School witches had been privy to the conspiracy too. It's not confirmed that Grandmaster Ren had died in this tournament, but it is likely, as when Vesemir was released, he was the new Grandmaster of the Wolf School. By the 1230s, no new witches were being raised by the Wolf School, as Vesemir did not have the alchemical knowledge needed to carry out the Witcher trials. The school has been in a steady decline ever since. In the year 1234, Oxenfurt was tormented by a Fleder, which was feasting on the blood of sleeping city folk. Finding the contract on a nearby notice board, Vesemir took the job and dealt with the vexatious vampire. During his stay in Oxenfurt, he met a young Redanian noblewoman named Mignol. They had first spied each other from a distance, and Mignol had her governess deliver the Witcher a letter. Were news of their mutual interest to spread, trouble would have certainly followed, as witches were considered subhuman. They were useful, but they were unnatural. They were mutants, and this pervasive perception is largely responsible not only for the deaths of many of Vesemir's peers, but also for the loneliness most witches feel. It's easy to forget this when seeing the world through Geralt's eyes. He too is persecuted, but that blow is softened by the interest he seems prone to attracting from exotic sorceresses. As far as we know, this was Vesemir's one chance at love, and he was soon in a secret relationship with the noblewoman. Though only a fleeting tryst, it seems the two fell deeply in love. That was until Mignol's father discovered the romance, and put out a warrant for the witch's arrest. Vesemir was forced to flee, but not before leaving Mignol with a gambeson to remember him by. The bounty hunters scoured Redania for the witcher, salivating at the thought of the price on his head. But Vesemir was far too skilled a survivalist to be caught. He escaped, but it was bittersweet, as he was never able to see his lover again. Mignol later married, as all nobles are obliged to do, though her husband died young, and she spent most of her life widowed. She lived on alone, with an estate and a sizable fortune to keep her company. Despite all her affluence, Vesemir's gambeson remained her prized possession, and she started collecting witcher gear, attending auctions all over the northern kingdoms. For the next few decades, Vesemir continued on as he always had, travelling the Witcher's Path for 3/4 of the year, before wintering at Kaer Morhen, where the ghosts of his fallen comrades must have lingered in every recess of the keep's cavernous halls. Vesemir travelled with Geralt for a time, in the year 1272, while helping the White Wolf pick up Yennefer's trail. When Geralt headed for the courts of Nilfgaard, Vesemir once again went his own way. He remained absent from the fateful narrative for some time, before the inevitable last stand at the Battle of Kaer Morhen. The old Witcher was not afraid, despite the spectral peril that was marching on his home. Vesemir had endured centuries of danger. He'd seen Kaer Morhen fall to vitriolic vandals who so vehemently hated the Witchers for their differences. And an army of elves in skeletal armour was not going to cow him. Never pounce on an advantage as soon as it appears. Wait till it stands to have maximum effect. He fought gallantly and slew countless attackers. When the hunt unleashed their frost magics upon the keep, only Vesemir and Ciri were unaffected. He desperately tried to get Ciri to safety, but their retreat was impeded by Eredin and his generals. Imlerith throttled Vesemir, leaving Ciri alone and encircled by the phantom riders. He cried for her to flee, but she wouldn't leave her mentor. She always was an unruly child, which Vesemir adored about her. He drew his dagger and thrust it into Imlerith's side, sacrificing himself for Ciri, and inadvertently saving them all by invoking her elder blood powers. The battle had ended in a temporary victory, but there was no elation among the defenders. They built a pyre overlooking Kaer Morhen Valley, where Vesemir had lived for centuries, and then the wolves congregated to cremate their mentor, and to honour their father. Vesemir's long life had finally come to an end. One day Geralt would meet Mignol and tell her of her long-lost lover's fate, and in learning it, she would be widowed all over again. But even though we may never know how old a Witcher can naturally become, Vesemir was true to his word. No Witcher dies in his bed. And that concludes the story of Vesemir. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Drew, and I'll see you in the next one.